In this training session, we're going to look at event log filters in EventSentry. So this is going to be more of a general overview so you understand the flow and how events from the event logs are being processed. And there'll be some follow-up videos where we actually go into creating specific event log filter rules to include or exclude events. So in the management console, if we expand, of course, the packages container here, we see event logs, and that's where all of our event log rules are present. Remember, everything in EventSentry is a package, and whether or not a package applies to a specific host depends on its assignment. So there's a separate video on that. What we're going to look at here is the processing and the monitoring of events. There's a built-in event viewer, and we can take a peek here at the application event log. So we can monitor any event in Windows with EventSentry, whether those are the built-in logs, the standard logs like application, security system, but also custom event logs, right? A lot of times there's very pertinent information in some of these event logs that are not as obvious. For example, PowerShell, you may want to monitor PowerShell for security reasons, but there's a bunch of events about backups and sysmon and so forth, remote desktop, that you can also monitor with EventSentry, of course. And events are monitored by agents in real time that are running on all of your Windows-based machines. So there's no polling taking place. These events are processed in real time. And since we have a collector component that supports where the client side supports caching, you can also monitor events on laptops, for example. And these events are going to get cached if there's no connection to the network, and then transmitted again when those agents have a connection with your collector. So here we have a list of packages. So depending on the assignments here, so for example, let's take a look at this email notification package here. So this package, we click the assign button, we can see is currently only assigned to domain controllers. So these, whatever filters are inside this package, and there's a number of them, these filters will only run on any computer that is in the domain controllers group, in this case just one. And this is how the flow basically works. So all the assigned packages are going to be loaded into the rule set of that specific agent, depending on the package assignments and so forth. And any event is going to get processed by all the filter rules that match it. So the agent is essentially going to start from the top. Let's take a look at the antivirus software, for example, here. So this is a global package that's assigned to any computer. So any computer is going to get this. And if you look at the list here, we'll see that they're all red. So these are exclusion filters. So that means that we are purposely saying we do not want to get notified about these events. And notice that there's an action set. So if we click on the properties of that package, we can see here that it only applies to the default email action. And then remember down here, if we expand actions, we have a number of actions here. We have email database. So these events, these rules only apply to email. They will not apply to the database. And that's important because that's a common mistake where people create rules and then wonder why they don't work. And that's because they apply to the wrong action. But let's take a look at a very basic event here. So here's somewhere in the malware bytes called web protection driver. So this is looking at a service monitoring event in EventSentry. So let's take a look how this works. So this applies to any event that's logged in the application event log with a severity of error. We are excluding this event, so we don't want it to go to the email. If the event source is EventSentry, the category service monitoring, if it's one of these event IDs, and if the first text in the first insertion string matches that name. But let's take a look at a couple of others. Let's look at compliance, for example. Here we see that this package also has an action set, but this time it's the primary database. So any filter in this package, and they're categorized here into little subfolders, is going to only apply to the database. So this is obviously a bigger package. There's over 100 rules in it. But the purpose of this package, of course, is to make sure that crucial Windows events are stored in the database. Let's take a look here. I'm going to expand this here a little bit. User account creation, okay? So now again, applies to the primary database, security event log, audit success or failure. This is covering legacy events from older versions of Windows as well. But essentially, if a audit failure or audit success happens in the security event log, so that pretty much is any event because those are the only severities there are in the security event log, it's going to get included. So it's going to get forwarded to this action. It's going to look at one of these two event sources, and it's going to look at one of these two event IDs. And the same applies to all the other things here. And there's some exclusions here as well. So the majority of events, as we can see here, they're all include events, as indicated by the green arrow pointing to the right. But there's two exclusions. So for example, filtering platform. So these are very noisy events which serve very little purpose in terms of forensics. They're always audit success events. They're affecting several event IDs of 46, 47, and then a range of 50 to 58. So you can also specify ranges here. You do not have to manually type all those in. And those are simply going to be excluded. So you'll never see those in the primary database. Exclusions pretty much always override inclusion. So even if you had an inclusion filter further down below about these events, the exclusion is going to override that and it's going to get excluded. So while we're at this, so why don't we take a look down here at the email notification package. So here you can see we have only 4 rules. Again, the action is set on the package level. You don't have to set the action on the package level, but if all the filter rules apply or should apply to the same action, then it makes a lot of sense because it makes the configuration a lot easier. And here we have email critical events. So this filter is actually enabled, whereas all of these are disabled. And you can see that if you look at the ribbon up there, you can see how the enable button is available versus here that it's renamed to the disable button. Okay, you can also see it by the icon here that these are excluded filters because it's displayed in gray. Whereas, let's look at one down here, whereas these are green, so these are gray. So gray indicates that the filter's disabled. So this is a default package EventSentry installs for you. And we can see that it covers a variety of different alert situations, types of events. First, audit failures. So any audit failure from the security event log is being sent to email, and that's very often not something you necessarily want to do unless you have a very comprehensive set of exclusions, because Windows unfortunately logs a lot of audit failures to the event log. Critical events are any error that happens in any of the event logs. So usually that applies to application system, but could of course also apply to other logs, as you can see here. And here's some other examples, of course, of event logs that are not the standard logs, Hyper-V, for example. There's also a threshold here, but we're going to cover thresholds in a separate video. But in essence, we're not going to be sending more than 10 events per hour per computer. And if you wanted to enable an event, you can simply click the enable button, and now the event is enabled. It has this ruler icon here, which indicates that there's a threshold assigned to the filter, and it also shows you that the filter is enabled. Let's look at this diagram here so we can visualize the flow of events one more time. So on the very top there, we have the event logs that are generating logs and that we're actively monitoring with the real-time monitoring engine. And that means we have access to all sorts of different functionality, starting with basic filter rules that would just be saying, okay, I just want this event to be stored in the database. That's it. Then moving forward, with more advanced things like thresholds. Okay, so we only want to get a certain amount of events sent to a email action, for example, or a web API, whatever that may be. And then we have a lot more advanced things like filtered timers, recurring filters that are going to be explained in other videos. But the flow of events is as such that the agent will essentially process all the assigned packages and the rules contained within those, and then decide, where to dispatch these events. So for every event that the agent encounters, for every single event that's written to the event log, it will process all of these rules, and then at the end, dispatch them accordingly. So that could mean writing it to the database, maybe launching a process or a script, sending it by email, and so forth.